Alright, so I'm starting on my tank here. First thing I want to do is clean this bad boy with some alcohol. Now, obviously, I've already taken the gas out of this, so beforehand, if you want to have any comments about don't put flame to gas, well, we're not going to worry about explosions here because there's no gas in this guy. In your pre-stages of doing anything, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? So we want to clean this guy up as best as we can. I use isopropyl alcohol, 70%. Use 90%, whatever you have. I prefer that, just as a general rule of thumb. And it's the easiest thing that I can get. You can pick it up at your local, pharmacy store, Walmart, whatever. I like to take the little trigger part out of another bottle and put it directly on there. I just cut the little shaft part off short, and it's just easier to work with. Nice little tip or trick there. So, cotton towel, I just wipe everything down as best as I can. If something's really dirty, generally I'll wash it with like some dish detergent, water, wipe it down real good, get all the grease and bad particles off. This guy was not really dirty, so I'm just cleaning it with alcohol first off. Try to get around the creases and edges, especially the edges that are going to be in this recessed area. You want to make sure those are really clean, because in an instance when I go to lay my vinyl down and I try to adhere and there's trash or grease or oil or something right there, it's not going to stick. And with this being a gas tank, I really want to take a lot of care to make sure that I get everything off, because if there's any kind of gas runs or anything that's really saturated and I just kind of lightly clean, I'll have a problem. And I really don't want to run into that. So again, clean it off really well. You have some little things right there. Look there. Again, recessed areas I do want to concentrate a little bit more on, especially around this gas cap here. I'm not going deep inside because it's going to be covered. So I'm not going to worry too much about that, but especially around the edges, where stuff can kind of linger and you don't really acknowledge it. So once I've cleaned this, for those that really want to go the extra mile with their finished product, you can use a knifeless tape. I'm using Design Line, and since this portion right here has a cover for it and it's already been pre-done, so rather than take my awful blade and cut this guy up, blade to paint, no, I really would prefer not to do that. And if it's your personal bike and this is a hobby and you just want to try something out, definitely do what works for you. It's not recommended. It's just good, clean practice. And for most of us that know what we're doing, we'll use a knifeless tape and we'll go around the edges and make sure that it's properly done. Again, I'm going in a recess with this. It's mostly going to be covered. So where I want my pieces to end would be typically where I would put this. So I'm going to go a little bit further in. I usually try to go about 1/4 inch in. Now, as far as if it's straight or not, that part really doesn't matter because it's not going to be seen. But I do want to emphasize that this is Design Line, so it's not a rigid tape. It is more or less made to be used around corners the way it's intended. So I'm just going to simply lay something out with this so that you kind of get an idea, oh hey, this is how this works. So I'm going to come back over it just in this general little strip here and make sure everything's pressed down nice and firmly. Now if I do pull with this, it will cause fingers, like a little ridge, especially for you tent guys. If you know what a finger is, then this is kind of the same concept there. And if I want to continue around with this guy, again, not really trying to pull, or if you're a pinstripe guy, you kind of understand that, you know, pulling can be good in some cases, but in this case, it's not. So too much stress on this will cause it not to stick, and an unclean surface will not allow it to stick. So we're just going to finish on down as best we can, pressing all the entire way. I'm going to come back up again. I'm just staying about a 1/4 inch around because it's not really necessary for me to be right in the recess or any less. So again, we're just kind of generally laying this on here. And I'm going to cut this guy off right at the edge. So I've got one side done, stuck down. Kind of go over it to make sure I don't really have any kind of places lifting that are going to give me problems once I actually put the vinyl down, because that's the last thing that you want. So I'm going to take my knife, leave myself a little access. That was a good bit of access, not really necessary, but for somebody that hasn't worked with knifeless before, it will be a little interesting for you. So hopefully this video will help. Again, just as a general application, I'm going to use more than one piece. So again, I'm staying about a 1/4 inch out from the recess, because the idea is to lay that recess down. I'm not stretching it into it, which is something else that I'll go over later on. Just trying to stay ahead of this. Not a lot of tension, not necessary. Again, going over it, taking my thumb, just the edge of my thumb, and pressing down, make sure the adhesive is kind of stuck. If you lay this stuff down, and you just lay it down, just kind of run your hand over it, it looks kind of opaque. But once you've put a good amount of pressure on this, it'll clear out. And I guess the thought behind this is that it'll let you know that, hey, I'm stuck to this surface. And again, you know, if your surface has not been prepared correctly, say you have wax or you have like a coating on this stuff is not going to stick, and this, you know, you're going to have to remove it. So, you know, whether that process be through certain chemicals, or let's just say, you know, you have a coating on it, you have to have that coating removed. And if you know how to do that, that's great, that's fine. In my case, we don't have a chemical on here, so I don't have that to show you. So again, about a 1/4 inch out with this guy. We're going around. I'm just going to go a little bit faster this time, maybe a little bit more sloppy, right? So we're going to press down firmly, just kind of keeping an eye on it, not stretching anything, because again, this stuff doesn't necessarily like to be stretched. And what I mean is just pulling too much on it with excessive force. And I'm going to get to my end piece there. Now, press down, take my knife. I like to leave a little tag out, just because if where I start this, put it back in this little container here, leave a little tag out. Generally when I start this, I'll take my knife, not my samurai sword there you just saw, but I'll take run the blade out just a little bit. Go ahead and start a new blade, fresh blade. And just before the line, I'll make a little slice. So on the other side, I'll do the same thing, just in reverse, almost the same angle. I almost make an arrow, so I'm cutting in this direction and I'm cutting in that direction. And what happens is I got two little points there that I can grab, and I'll tug, and it'll cut this. So that's the idea behind the knifeless take when you want to start it. There are obviously different methods that people like to use. That's the method that works best for me. The second thing that I'm going to start with is 3 ounce blue tape. It's a medium tack. It's not high tack. As soon as I can figure out where the beginning of it is, hey, look, there it is. Tear it nicely. Get a nice little start here. So around this gas tank here is where I'm going to tape. There's really no point of me trying to get real technical with this right here, because all I'm really wanting to do is cover up this little inlet where you pour in the gas. I'm just going to overlap it, and later I'll come back in here and kind of trim this out. And there are remnants of fuel in here, so that's why I'm taping it up, because sometimes the gases will irritate the vinyl, and that's the last thing you want to deal with. And it's just good practice. The vinyl itself will not stick to the outside of this, so it comes in handy other ways. So I'm just going to kind of lightly take this and cut it. I'm not actually cutting on the paint itself. Not that it matters, because it's deep in here and you can't see it anyways. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Again, I'm just going to cut this guy out right here, just because I want it clean. Nice little smooth motion there. Again, I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I'm just using the old tip man's method and lightly cut it as best as I can. Now, as I mentioned before, the vinyl does not like to stick to the outside of this right here. So let's say I'm in an instance where I have this laid down and I cut my piece big. Well, I kind of don't want it to stick to this right here, because maybe it's going to cause problems. I can put a little bit right here, or I can just cover the whole thing. It's just a matter of how you want to treat it. You can cover this up. This is kind of haphazardly, but I'm just going to cover up this general area, because I don't want my vinyl sticking to it here. So I'm just going to kind of cover that up. I just overlap it to get a good decent little amount of coverage, just as an example. So like on areas like on cars, like windows, this stuff sticks extremely well. Sometimes I cover certain areas up with tape to keep it from sticking, especially like rubber moldings and things like that that are here too. I'm not necessarily going to cover it with vinyl. I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Obviously I'll use my knifeless tape, so I don't want to cut around if I don't have to. In some cases you just can't really get around it. So the idea around this is that I have my knifeless tape on it. I've got a little bit of tape on there just for, you know, a little know-how for some of you guys that really haven't messed with this stuff before. And again, this is an extreme case of basically we're using a round object, and, you know, we have a flat surface that we're going to put on this paper on a rock. So I have this guy here, and what I really want to emphasize with this stuff is that it's directional. So most of my other pieces are finished, and they're all been laid out in a directional way. So I use the arrows on the back of my material and see if I can do my best to give you a good little look at this stuff. Is that those arrows are in that direction here. So maybe you can see that a little bit. Used to you could use this, but sometimes that wasn't always the best I found, especially with certain vinyls. So we're gonna lay this guy out here. So I want to cut a piece that's going to give me enough coverage, and obviously I don't want too much coverage because that can be a problem. I don't want pieces way out here and trying to work with the material, because that's not going to make it any easier. So I also don't want to make it too short. Well, I can go about it a couple of different ways, but what seems to be the general rule of thumb is to use the liner. Move this guy out of the way. This is a 60-inch roll. So my table's clean. I'm gonna kind of roll out. what I have so you can kind of get a good indication of the direction here that we're going. Keep that from rolling. So what I have is a simple yarn tape. I want to get a general surface area by inches. I usually leave a little slack 2 inches, and I go over the widest point, which is going to be the mid point of this tank. So once I've gone here, my exact number would probably be roughly about 29 inches. I don't want to go 29 inches. I want to give myself enough slack that if I need to have a little extra, I can. So I'll go a little big. Now, obviously, I'm not going all the way across, and this does have magnetic ends, good for me, right? I'll put my 2-inch point there. So the exact would be 22, but I'm going to leave it a little big to give myself a little leeway. Now, we have 34 inches wide with a little access, and we have roughly about 25 on the midsection here. So how I've been laying out everything is just one general direction here. So I'll lay my arrows out this way. They're coming towards me. That's how I've been cutting them, and that's how I lay them. I don't want to drag too much friction. A little bit of static. Now another method is you could simply just throw this guy up here. Boom. Yeah, that looks good. And cut it out. No, let's not do that. Let's take our tape, cut it out nicely so that we don't have too much unnecessariness. I've got 34 inches here, which would be exactly what I need. So in the case of some of you new guys, you want to give yourself a little extra space, why not? Let's give it just a few extra inches. You're just going to waste it anyhow, so we'll go ahead and cut it a little big. So in this case, I gave myself an extra inch or 2. Now, if you noticed, and I just found this out, this is 4 inches across from center point to center point. So if you don't have a tape, you can kind of use that as a general rule that, oh, okay, this is a 4x4 inch square. Cool. All right. So that's, if you need to measure it that way, you can. So I have 34 inches here. Obviously, I'm not going to cut this far back because I would like to keep some of this stuff and not waste so much of it. But again, if you're a hobbyist and you're just kind of trying to figure this stuff out and you want to waste this stuff, go right ahead. That's everybody's prerogative. So I'm going to pull this guy back just a little bit, because really all I need is about 25 inches from the front. So for the down, again, I'm going to give myself about 36 inches. Right there. 18 would be my center point. I'll have enough for the edges. Now, if you're lucky enough to know how to cut straight, you'll use these little crosshairs as they can act as a guide for cutting. So in my case, I've given myself just a little bit extra on the front and the back, which is going to make this roughly 36 by 36. Again, using my tape measure, use my own device there. I'm going to cut this guy from wince point, which is a little over half. I'm going to cut this guy straight across. Now, I'm going to use this other guide right here. I'm going to cut straight down. Pow. Alright, so we've cut this. I'm going to keep my tape measure kind of rolled up as nicely as I can so that it doesn't get everywhere, as it normally likes to do. And now that I've cut this, I can roll it back up. A nice easy way back to put it back in storage. I can tape it with the tape, but in this case I'm still kind of using it, so I'm just going to roll it, keep it out of the way, just as good practice. Now I'm in a climate controlled room, obviously. We like to keep our temperature in here at about 75, 74 degrees, especially being in the south. It's kind of nice. You can keep the humidity low, and it makes it a lot easier to work with pieces like this. Now, if this stuff had been sitting and I had dust settle particles come over it, I would go ahead and just wipe this bad boy down again, because it's just going to make sense, because I don't want to have a terrible finish with this once I'm done. If at all, on something that's as shapely as a tank, if you have two guys help you, that's great. If you can call your buddy over, drink a beer, hey, let's lay this down real quick so I don't have to handle it so much, that's the best way. That'd be a preferred way. Right now, I have myself, so what I'm going to do is peel this back as best as possible. So keep in my general direction as best as I can. Hey, look, my drinking buddy showed up. He's gonna come over here and help me pull this liner. My beautiful assistant. So, just in the nick of time, somebody helped me. So, as he walks away shaking his head, he's gonna walk back over here and grab this other side so that I can show you guys how I wanna put this on. So I'm gonna slide this a little closer, right so, all right. My assistant here is gonna help me keep this kind of straight. Now, just as an example, we're gonna kind of lay this down. No, did I measure it out and do I know where I need to be? I gave myself access, so it's on there. Thanks to my assistant who came in just in the nick of time and saved me, man. Alright, so I've kind of laid this out. I want to kind of position it as best as I can. So I got a couple problem areas with this. I have 1, 2, 3, which kind of makes a triangle, which is weird, right? So most of my stress, as you can see, is in these corners. And in the case that I do not want to have adhesive lines and working this stuff little by little, I'm going to try to do bulk areas. So I'm going to heat it up and try to, and if some of you guys understand what I'm saying, I'm going to kind of heat these fingers out. I'm going to use my heat gun and kind of move the vinyl. For you that don't understand what fingers are, these are fingers, okay? And in the case that you really want to know what those are, because even though these are big fingers right now, they'll work themselves into smaller fingers and cause creases, because you're going to work little by little, and we really don't want to try to do that. So what I've found with working with this vinyl is that if I can go ahead and try to make enough smooth area, pulling these areas out as best I can, I'll leave myself with a few little ridge fingers. And I'll lessen that area as I move along. So we're just going to kind of stretch this out as best I can, working some of the tension towards the areas that are going to be less, so I have a nice smooth area. Now, if you notice, this tank goes down. That's a problem. Again, round object, paper going over rock. One-dimensional over three-dimensional. That can be intimidating, especially something that's a little bit harder to work with in some cases. Especially something that's just not a thin vinyl. Now, I've given myself enough area. I'm just going to kind of show you guys that I'm going to start in the general area. So I pulled out